Hi, Ross, and thank you very much for joining us today. You and your team achieved a number of milestones in 2023, including the completion of the feasibility study on the Triple R deposit. And I want to start right here by just reviewing the results from that study. And maybe you can just give us a brief highlight of that study, touching on the CapEx, the NPV, and also the internal rate of return.
Sure, I can, and it's a pleasure to be here with you, Jimmy, and be able to have this discussion. No, I mean, it was a very big milestone for Fission Uranium last year, completing the feasibility study. That was basically filed in February last year, so it's still less than a year old. I think what it showed was this is an extremely viable operation, future operation. By the way, we used $65 uranium, which was forward-looking. When we were completing the study in January, February last year, $65 uranium was still, somewhere in the future. Well, we far surpassed that. But basically, all of the underlying economics are just so much, even vastly improved. But it really showed, this to be the Triple R deposit to be one of the lowest operating cost uranium operations out there. We'll be, just sub $10 a pound US for operations. That's good, and all-in sustaining costs of just under 14 US, so 18 Canadian, 14 US on the all-in sustaining. That tells you there's some tremendous margins, with given the price of uranium at $100, you can see where that can go. But we outlined just a 10-year mine life, and averaging just over 9 million pounds of uranium a year. So low cost, high volume. It's going to be a tremendous asset. And by the way, the underlying economics, I guess, at that $65 price uranium. At the time, we looked at after-tax NPV of around $1.2 billion, an IRR of what was 27% then after tax. So it looks really healthy. And as I said, with the current uranium prices, it's phenomenally, vastly improved even since then.
Yes, I'm glad you mentioned the fact that the study was done at $65 uranium. It's amazing how much has changed in the past year. But you mentioned that the CapEx is 1.1 billion Canadian. How will you fund this?
Sure, yeah, 1.15 billion Canadian, and looking at about a 2.5-year payback on that CapEx. How does it get funded? Well, I mean, it's still a little ways out for us yet to have it fully mapped out, but I mean, there will be a lot of components, I think, that goes in. Certainly, the majority of it, right at this point, looks to be debt financed. There will be, I'm sure, a component of equity to it as well, so maybe a 70-30 type split ratio. But there's also other things that we would want, maybe possibly consider bringing in a strategic partner to help, somebody with possibly mining experience, but a strategic partner into the deal to be able to help with the financing, and then we'll see. There's a possibility too. You would think on some sort of sales opportunities with contracts with utilities, and I'm not talking about locking in prices. We obviously want to be able to take advantage of higher uranium prices, but I think that as you get closer to mine financing, I'm pretty sure that the lenders would want to see visibility, with who it is that we're actually selling uranium to, and get some sort of an idea of what those prices would be. So I see all those kind of components being in there. There's also the opportunities for streaming, royalty, Right now, we're a 100% owned project, so we've got a great deal of flexibility on what we can do with respect to financing.
And your deposit has many advantages, one of which is it's located along the same geological corridor as NextGen's, which is the Patterson Lake corridor. And maybe you can just touch on that and how close are these two deposits?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Patterson Lake corridor is a long geologic trend. It's, what would it be? Something in the order of 500 meters across from north to south. It's an east-west trending corridor, and it's several kilometers long. And you're right, it is extremely prolific. We have two world-class deposits sitting, 3 to 4 kilometers apart from each other. NextGen's Arrow, and then of course Fission's PLS property, very, very close. It's the same geology, the same trend. And then of course, if you go the other way, it's also encouraging to see what's happening on the Patterson Lake corridor on Cameco Orano joint venture land. They have a showing called the Spitfire, which also has some high-grade drill intercepts, but it really tells you just the potential that's out there in the Patterson Lake corridor to host, world-class ore bodies, and I think there's plenty more yet to be discovered. So, which is also, I think at some point, in this discussion, we can talk how meaningful that'll be into our exploration program too, because we think that the Patterson Lake corridor has so much upside. Yes, it has two projects already in the advanced development stage there, but I think that the opportunities are ripe to find more. So yeah, they're two projects very close together. And both looking to be, very low cost operations. So, these will be, I think, without, too much of a stretch, forward-looking statement. I think these are going to be the next major deposits to be developed in the Athabasca Basin, what we're seeing out in the southwest side of the province.
So having said all that, a large part of your CapEx is for the construction of a mill, which is approximately $350 million. And if you do not build a mill, your CapEx will be significantly lower. And this is something that you've considered. And when I ask this, I'm making the assumption that you might have access to NextGen's mill, given the fact that they're much further along the permitting process than you are.
Yeah, I mean, the two projects are really both advancing along, somewhat similar timelines. NextGen are about a year, somewhere between just over a year difference ahead of Fission on the permitting aspect. I think we're shorter to production timeline once you're in development than there. So I see the two projects coming on stream, at very, very similar times. And you're right to note, in our feasibility study, what we've done is showing this as a standalone project. These are all the economics based on a standalone project. That means us building our own mill and all the infrastructure associated with that. And really the same, the story is the same for NextGen. They've, modeled their project as a standalone basis. Well, having the project sitting just a few kilometers apart, very similar geology, similar aspects in all ways, and geographically sitting side by side, there's definitely opportunities, I think, to have, a central mill in the area, and that would benefit NextGen, that would benefit Fission, it would also benefit other projects nearby as well. So I see that as, one of the options being a central mill that's really a Western Athabasca-based proposition, where that, rather than having to duplicate, the cost of building your own mill, as you rightly noted, we're over $300 million in a part of the CapEx expenditure in the mill. Well, that's the same story for everybody else. If you could have a larger central mill, you really have the potential to substantially reduce CapEx and really be able to have far superior economics than even what we've already outlined. So I think it's certainly an avenue we're going to investigate. That would require, of course, cooperation. So we keep the lines of communication open. We're certainly, well aware of what the benefits for shared infrastructure are. i.e. the shared mill opportunity, but there's also a number of other areas that have cost savings for shared, like roads, power. I mean, the list is sort of endless on what the sharing opportunities are, but we'll be very cognizant of that. And I think that, that does require continued discussions, with our neighbors that are also actively exploring and advancing projects in the area. But to me, these are early days on the western side of the Athabasca Basin, and I think the future looks extremely bright, and perhaps some central cooperation on these elements. And if not, we've certainly shown the ability that this has extremely robust economics as a standalone operation. So we can go either way, but my preference, of course, is to reduce CapEx as much as we can.
Interesting points. As you mentioned, you are moving ahead as if this is a standalone operation, and you did submit applications for construction of a mill in April of 2023. How is that process progressing? What's the timeline associated with those permits?
Sure. So the permitting avenue that you're talking about is our application at the federal level. So that's with the CNSC. The CNSC, have just over a 2-year review period. So by the time we submit in April 2023, we really wouldn't expect to get a decision back from the federal government until mid 2025, we'll say. So they run on a slightly different timetable than the provincial EIA, the Environmental Impact Assessment phase, which is another parallel track on the regulatory body, but that's at the provincial level. It's a little bit different. But to get to your point, what you're asking about with the submittal that we put in April 23, I think we're looking at mid 2025 for the federal government to be able to provide their approval to go forward on that part.
And you and your team are working on a number of development programs, and one of which is the environmental impact statement. Mm-hmm. And you're going to submit that in the near future. How's that coming along?
Yeah, well, we're well on track. Our estimate is to be able to submit, and again, that's part of the provincial regulatory part of the equation. So we'll be submitting our EIS documents to the province of Saskatchewan in Q1. So basically the quarter we're in this calendar year. So right now we're estimating on being able to do that in February. So, we're already approaching the end of January now. So I think we're going to be in a position to submit that in February with the province. And, we're already well along the path of the EA, the environmental assessment phase of work, which we initiated back, in 2021. So it's been an ongoing dialogue with both the province and the federal government. But so, we're already, have this back and forth with these regulatory groups. But just on the formal side of it, we'll be submitting the EIS, the draft EIS documents, within a month or so.
You really must love the whole permitting process.
It's complicated and yet fairly straightforward. It takes time, and I think that's the issue. And I think to help us along, I think it goes a great distance knowing that we have a really, really strong team, in-house team. Our permitting and regulatory knowledge and experience within the group, I think, is second to none. And and I'm absolutely convinced of that. We have some of the top permitting experts from Cameco, leading the process, Cameco and Orano. So people that have been uranium mine developers and permitters in the past are working, for Fission on behalf of Fission on a full-time basis. So I just think the skill levels there, we know the process, what it takes to move these projects forward. And there's a lot of moving parts to it, but we're quite confident in our understanding of the process and the timelines involved.
And that's a very good point. You have made a number of hires in the last year from people that have worked at Cameco, worked at Orano. They have experience working with uranium and also in the basin. And this is another advantage. And a lot of people that are getting involved in the whole uranium sector now, just because it's ripping here at $100 a pound, they have no experience in the basin or in uranium.
It's a huge point, and yeah, I mean your team is everything. You know, if you ask a question, well, how does Fission intend to build a mine? How does it intend to be a developer? How does it intend to build a mine and go forward? Well, that's all about the people. First of all, we're blessed with having this tremendous asset that shows the economic viability to do it. But you need to have the people with the experience that have built mines before, that have operated mines relevant to the type of deposits that we're talking about in the jurisdiction. And that's exactly what we have. We spent a good part of 2023 putting together the entire development team. So that includes the permitting expertise that we talked about earlier, but then on the engineering front, on the processing front, on the health and safety group, we have 9 full-time employees now in the development team. And if you look at the resumes and just the quality of people that we have on the Fission team, I think you'll find in every one of those aspects, it's second to none. It's an absolute dream team portfolio of people that we have, and we know this is a group that can carry us forward into building the project outwards. We opened an office in Saskatoon in the fall of 2023, so I guess October is when we had our grand opening, and that's really the development office there. So we're an established group in the province of Saskatchewan. We've got all of our in-house expertise under one roof, and we really couldn't be more pleased than some of the accomplishments we've been able to achieve in 2023 with respect to building the group and moving the project forward.
And Ross, a large part of the success of any mining operation is also community engagement. Maybe you can just touch on that and what you've accomplished in the past year.
It absolutely is. It's key. We're up working in the northern part of the Canadian province. We have a number of Indigenous groups that live up in that area, that have small communities that are nearby, or just some impact by potential different groups in the area. So we've been developing the relationships with all of our Indigenous neighbors, communities. I mean, it's been an important part of our process since day one when we first started working on this project, is opening up these doors, these relationships. We've achieved capacity funding agreements with all of the groups we have that are represented, I guess, potentially impacted in the area, I guess is how you would look at it. We've got capacity funding agreements. That means they're partners of ours as we move the project forward through the environmental assessment phase here. They know what we're doing. They have their own consultants on board, their own environment expertise. They have their own legal counsel, and these are discussions that we have. So I think what we've seen is there's a great deal of support for projects like this. They understand the economic benefits for having projects in the north, and I think with that, coupled with your communication and desire to bring everybody into the discussions and determine, well, how can we best fit in as an operating company in the northern community where they live and have lived for generations and generations. I think we couldn't pick a better area than where we're at, but we've got, as I say, capacity funding agreements signed with all of the area's Indigenous groups, the rights holders, and we're working on impact benefit agreements. So with the key groups as well. So that's something that we hope to be able to advance to the stage of final agreements in 2024. So they're on the near-term horizons. As I say, I think that the appetite to see projects like this being developed in the area is very real. The communities want to see it. They understand the job opportunities, the services, in there, the potential spin-offs, but you have to do it in such a fashion that, we have complete buy-in, transparency on what it is, how the project operates, right from now in the development phase until, through the whole mining cycle and when it's all over and said and done. So, they're long-term relations, but I think we've built really strong relations and they continue to get better. And I think we're again on that front. We have a group that's had a great deal of experience working with northern communities. And I think I couldn't be more pleased with the progress we're making on that front as well.
Ross, I want to discuss your drilling program now. You just released that you're going to commence a winter drilling program. Maybe you can just touch on the targets and also how many rigs you're going to have and how many meters you plan on drilling.
Sure, yeah. We're just kick-starting off our exploration program right now. We put out news about a week ago that announced that the drills are on site. We're bringing the crews in. We should be drilling as we speak right now. Really, it's a lot of fun for us because we haven't really done any regional exploration on the property since about 2017. We've really been focusing on development and advancing the Triple R deposit, getting it into the queue for development and ultimately to be a producing asset. But we feel now is really the time to be out exploring. Obviously, you've got a really exciting uranium sector that supports exploration process. We think PLS is the best piece of real estate in the entire Athabasca Basin region, and by that I mean we some of the best property for finding another deposit. I think still the potential there rests on the PLS ground, and now we've got a fully staffed, well experienced exploration team. Some of the same team really that led to the discoveries on PLS back in the original discoveries back in 2012 and delineated all the way through and are have been with us for a long time. Anyways, 2 drills, we're testing multiple targets. We're going to focus at this point right along the Patterson Lake corridor where we have the Triple R deposit. We're testing targets that are both along strike of the EM conductor, the electromagnetic conductor, the graphitic fault zone corridor. That's the reason the Triple R is where it is. We think there's potential for finding more occurrences of high-grade uranium along that trend. So we'll be testing that this winter. We're looking at parallel targets, so parallel conductor trends to the north of the Triple R deposit, where we're expect sort of the same kind of results of Triple R. We'll be testing there, and also to the southwest on the Saloon target. So two drills right now, one set up on the Saloon, which is southwest of Triple R, and one set up on the Holster target, which is just north of Triple R. So it's going to be an exciting year. We're looking at about 6,000 meters right now between January 15th to towards the end of March. So we should be able to drill 6,000 meters, about 13 or 14 drill holes using two drill rigs. So I think it'll be a full program. And we're very excited to get back into the exploration game as well.
And so your intent is to grow the Triple R deposit to kind of find out where the outer boundaries are?
Well, this thing is to find new mineralization. It's not even so much growing the deposit itself, because we're stepping out sufficiently away from it and on targets that are not really associated with the deposit, but more on parallel structures, parallel features. So if we find mineralization, it should be new and unique. So not just incremental growth of the Triple R, but actual new mineralized targets is basically what we're looking at, but yet nearby. So we're still within a few kilometers of the Triple R deposit. So I think any discovery that we make, any meaningful discovery, would be able to benefit from, of course, the Triple R operation, right? The mining operation and mill in the area. So any new occurrences of mineralization it has a direct home, so a direct impact on the project. So it isn't just exploration in the frontier zones and hoping to find something new, but it would all be very additive, I suppose, to the operations that we're currently developing. So yeah, it's exciting, but these would be new targets and areas that we think have the potential for finding the next triple R.
Ross, let's move on now and discuss your balance sheet, and maybe you can tell us how much cash you have and how you're going to allocate that cash in the coming year.
Sure. Well, we've got a very healthy balance sheet right now. We're sitting at $74 million in the treasury, no debt. That $74 million is basically able to fund us through the whole development phase left. So the next 2 years, that'll get us to the point of construction on the project, basically. So we're funded to that point. And that also includes the exploration program that's ongoing right now in the winter. Remember, last fall we raised about $9.2 million in flow-through funding, and that was earmarked for exploration, of which the work I just described here a few minutes ago. So we're basically with the funds that we have in place, that gets us through 2024. It gets us basically through 2025 to the point where construction begins on the project. So I think we're in a pretty comfortable place right now. We don't need additional funds at the moment, but so we'll be very selective on if we do raise additional capital, how it is we go about doing it. But there's certainly no pressure for us to be raising additional capital at this time.
Ross, as we wrap up, we've covered a lot of different topics, and maybe you can just summarize what investors should expect in terms of news flow in the first half of the year from Fission Uranium.
Well, we're really busy right now, Jimmy. I mean, we're going full out on both exploration and development. So look for continuous news flow, particularly on the exploration front. Where we're be putting out news. I would imagine we'll batch drill results in series of 4 or 5 holes at a time. That's typically what we do. And I think the benefit too with in the uranium business, particularly Athabasca, we get a sense of the of mineralization or the potential mineralization just by radioactivity. And so I think if we you can see that almost with core coming right out of the drill site. We can see whether something is mineralized to high grade type potential. So we would look for a constant news flow. I think on the exploration front, we'll certainly just let the market know once we submit for our EIS on the regulatory front for project development, and any of the other major milestones that we continue to hit along 2024. I think will be a really busy year for us. So with the team fully engaged, we're well capitalized. We know what it is we're trying to accomplish in 2024. There's going to be a lot of moving parts and moving pieces, and of course with a brilliant uranium sector that we find ourselves in. We really couldn't find ourselves in a better place. And I think that I guess the final thought is I think people should have a look at the uranium sector, but really keep your eye on the development projects, the ones that can realistically bring a product to market in a relatively short time period in the best operating jurisdiction in the world. Certainly with respect to the uranium business, that's Saskatchewan, that's the Athabasca Basin, and then look for a team that can deliver, and that's Fission Uranium. So appreciate the opportunity to be able to talk about the story today.
Well, that was a great update, and I want to thank you very much for spending time with us today, and good luck on your upcoming drilling campaign.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure.